Hi there, you're watching Grumpy Opinions. Apologies for last week when things got a little bit late. In fact, this episode should be hopefully out before episode 7 comes out, but last week obviously wasn't. I managed to not get episode 5 out until episode 6 was already on. So apologies there, life got in the way. But if you're watching this, I assume you already know what Outlander is, and if not, well, you can look back because there's like over 100 videos where I've been reviewing every single episode up until now. So yeah, let's just jump straight in with episode 706, where the waters meet, starts out with Roger visiting a school to talk about Jemmy getting told off by his teacher last week, and only ends up managing to land himself a job there teaching the GALLIC. Then later him and Bree are discussing the wibbly wobbly time portal in the tunnels, and Rogers is writing this down in his time traveller's guidebook. But silly sod, he forgets that he's got a GALLIC class to teach, so he rushes out to sermonise all about the GALLIC, and starts singing songs. Only it turns out that Horny Foreman is there and accidentally gets handed Roger's time traveller's guide instead of a sheet of GALLIC songs. And so he ended up reading it, and now he wants to have dinner at the Mackenzie's house next week, and Roger's far too polite to say no. After that evening though, he's putting away his Scott's porridge oats when he spies someone at the window, so playing it cool he considers dancing around in the kitchen until he manages to run at the door and chases him down, only to find it's some random guy in a familiar looking wig and outfit, who he punches out. Meanwhile in the past, Jamie and Claire are escaping in the woods, with the mad bint I forgot to mention from last week still being weird and shell-shocked and mad, only she ends up wandering off by herself, so Claire of course wanders off by herself looking for her, and when the mad woman offs herself, Claire gets captured by the Redcoats. And then Claire finds herself locked in a pen with a bunch of other prisoners back at Ticonderoga, and she gets pretty stroppy with the guards, who go off to find her some water after she complains. And then she finds one-legged woodcock, and he's not doing too well, so Claire does a Claire and goes off to find supplies and ends up shouting at the nearest soldier, who happens to be William, having recently arrived himself at Ticonderoga and getting a mild telling off for not delivering those messages to the guys who it turns out are actually secret spies in the rebel camp. So he ends up getting Claire herbs and brandy, but there's no food because all the wagons have been held up and the rebels burnt all the stores as they left. But luckily, Jamie and Ian haven't been doing nothing all this time because Ian snuck in pretending to be a British side native scout, and he catches up with Claire, just as William happens by, who then realises this isn't alright, and just as things are about to get a bit awkward and difficult, Jamie shoots a hay cart repeatedly with fire arrows, and William ends up letting them go, saying, well, that's a square now for you saving my life. Then outside Ticonderoga they meet up with Jamie and it's off to the rebel camp, where Jamie's good shooting gets himself a place in a Welsh sniper division, which he just agrees to, and after that they're off to Saratoga. And Claire realises that that's an important battle in the war, but promises Jamie no matter what happens, she'll find him. End of episode. So what did I think? Well, there was some really interesting stuff this week. I mean, starting out with William's return back to Ticonderoga. I mean, I didn't realise that he'd actually lost those secret notes with the horse. I mean, I assumed he had them in his pocket, but I do like that his boss respected that he followed orders to the letter and didn't read the notes. And also, you know, they set up the fact that he now plainly feels like he owes something back to his boss and back to the army. But at the same time, he's going to have to make some kind of difficult decision because they're also setting up that he's got mixed loyalties, you know, shown by the fact that he let Claire and Ian go because he'd had his life saved by Ian. And it makes sense, because this show can't really have William be a hard and fast royalist who's going to end up, like, completely against the rebels, because that would make him an antagonist, like a proper antagonist. And I'm going to be honest, this is not the kind of show that's going to have him pitted against Jamie, unless they started off by showing him literally, like, killing baby chickens or something when he was wee, and that he's grown up to be an evil baddie, because that's kind of how Galbadon writes these sort of villains. And I don't think the showrunners would have the balls to go against the story and make him a proper baddie. I also liked the fact that we got a little bit more of one-legged woodcock because, you know, there was some reason to him appearing in the previous episode. But unfortunately, well, he's dead now. And the same goes for, like, the mad woman that I didn't even mention last week because I just thought it was a completely random thing just to give Claire a little bit more screen time. I didn't realise she was going to be shell-shocked and mad and terrified that somebody was going to kill her and then offed herself. But really, my real enjoyment came with this. Of all scenes. You might be surprised because it is a little bit hooter-chooter, like silly GALLIC back at school stuff, but it was nice. It felt realistic, it felt fun, it felt Roger just getting on with things and doing a job that makes sense for his character. And it is true that the GALLIC, although I hate them calling it the GALLIC, it's funny because there has been kind of a push for GALLIC to be brought back into schools, but there has been a movement for it for a long time, although it never really got that much traction until probably the 1990s. It was just interesting. Although, I got to be honest, I didn't entirely buy Roger's sudden disorganisation and the fact that he didn't know that he was supposed to be taking a class at that time. That doesn't seem like the Roger that we've known since the beginning of the show, who was the learned professor who there was no sign of things being totally disorganised, or at least not that I remember. So, yeah, it felt like that was just like, in this moment, we've suddenly made him that way, which felt a bit odd. And also, is this guy, is he gay for Roger? I mean, that's the impression I get here. It looks like he wants to, like, lick his face while he tells him sci-fi stories about time travel.
Great. I'll see you soon.
Okay, pal. But, while this certainly wasn't a bad episode, it did have a hell of a lot of problems. I mean, main issue was with the writing, the direction, some of the staging and blocking, and the way it just sort of fit together, and some of the reality of the situations we saw. And a lot of this, I think, feels like it comes from bad direction, and the director of the episode was somebody called Tracy Deer, and IMDb says that the main body of her work was that she made a TV show called Mohawk Girls, which is some kind of like comedy show that's a bit of Sex in the City, but about Native American women on a reservation. I've not seen it, it might be really good, no idea. And I'm not blaming her specifically, but I can see how that sort of logic of somebody who's basically only ever really made a comedy show would apply like that to a show like this, because there's a comedic feel to a lot of this episode that felt a little out of whack with the reality of what's going on. Yeah, we've got Jamie and Claire on the run at the start in real peril, we've got the daft wench checking herself out on the log, and then Claire's thrown into a pen with us starving, sick and wounded, some of them are at death's door, and you're like, okay, cool, so this is serious, so this is sensible, but no, because 5 minutes later she's just berating one soldier who looks shocked, but then goes off and gets her water, and that felt like daft, but fair enough, you know, stuff like that has happened. But then 2 seconds later, the same guy's literally standing in the background in the wide shot. But then Claire just starts letting herself out of the prison pen and no one cares. And by the end of the episode, she's letting loads of people out of it and nobody cares. And then she goes off and shouts at a soldier, but luckily it turns out to be William, not someone that's going to punch her in the face, but somebody who goes, I know you, I like you, I'll do whatever you say. Now, Claire has been a prisoner a lot of times in this show, and Claire's always been the stroppy type who just doesn't seem to back down in the face of impending, like, getting shot in the face, but the show kind of treated it as serious, but here...
Actually, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience.
And I couldn't take it seriously with her just, like, letting herself out of prison constantly with her mates and nobody caring. Now, I credit the show by not demonising the British, by, like, having, you know, some nice ones pop up and them being reasonable people, unlike other representations of this war that I've seen in film and TV. The Patriot.
Shut the doors. Burn the church.
I'm the bad guy.
Not only that, but the whole undercover Ian stuff just felt bonkers to me. I mean, I get that, you know, the tribes have a habit of adopting people into them, but surely to, like, British white folks, a ginger pasty Scottish Mohawk is going to be an anomaly, and probably one that they would presumably have asked the native guys who are there, is this guy, is he kosher? Is he on the level? I mean, yeah, also adding to that, the whole escape thing was gubbins. I mean, it was shot really badly and done really badly. I mean, while I did really like the build-up to it, with Ian and Claire having, like, this quiet word, then suddenly William turns up and it's all awkward and it's, oh no, is he going to realise, is he going to notice that the two of them are together and put it together? But the more I thought about it, the more that actually made less and less sense, because the only thing he knows about Ian is that he met him on Fraser's Ridge and that he's the nephew of Jamie and Claire. That's all he knows about this guy, so when he meets him, I mean, yeah, sure, he's happy to see him, but it takes until he walks away to go, wait a minute, I met my Auntie Claire a minute ago, and now you're here. I mean, that surely would have been almost the first thing to pop into his head, because he surely would have been thinking about that. You know, that's fun. Oh, there's Auntie Claire, that's funny, I met Ian the other day, and that's her nephew. I mean, that's how a human being thinks. But... right, it just felt contrived and it felt fake. Also, when he let them go, they literally just kind of run away kind of comedically in the background, right past a bunch of guards who are just standing there looking bored, despite the fact that they think that actually the base is under attack, but they just look like they're just bored out of their mind. I mean, it's just failure to direct the background extras and also to block a scene and film it in a way that actually seems realistic. Speaking of which, how come Jamie manages to land 4 arrows in the same hay cart? And also, why does he land 4 arrows in the same hay cart? I mean, yeah, sure, he's not trying to, like, destroy the place or burn it down. I mean, presumably, because, you know, Claire and Ian are in there. But once you've hit the same thing a couple of times, I mean, that's it. Apart from the fact that they're going to start seeing where your arrows are coming from and send guys out to get you. But also, you know, it's already on fire. Do you need to set it more on fire? And doubling that, It's a fort with a 20-foot wall around it, so I mean, how can he see the car? How does he even know what he's shooting at? I mean, if he's high enough to see it, he shouldn't be able... The only place apparently where you could actually see that high is on that hill, and there's no way that he managed to fire an arrow from the top of the hill. And if he did, he certainly wouldn't need to be shooting it up in the air the way he does. So, yeah, what's he aiming at again and again and again? How does he know he's not actually shooting right into the middle of the prison pen where everyone's being kept? It's just silly. Another weird bump I had at the end of the episode was that they mentioned about 3 different times, twice of them in the last 5 minutes, that Jamie was almost at the end of his conscription.
Jamie's term of service was almost over, and we'd be leaving soon for Scotland.
Like, what was his conscription? Like 2 weeks, a month and a half? It's really weird because we haven't got a real understanding of time, so it seems dubious because you'd assume this conscription was going to be like a year or 6 months, but it feels like it's been about 3 days. But also, it's kind of weird because he suddenly meets a guy who is the same rank as him. They're both colonels. And the guy says, "Oh, I want you to be in my sniper gang, boyo." And Jamie's like, "Aye, okay, that's a good idea. Better than going to Scotland." Which made no sense to me because he could have just said, "No, I don't buy it." And the show doesn't try and justify it in the plot or discussion. He just says yes off screen, and then Claire goes, "Yeah, totally, that's fine. I totally go along with that. That's great. I thought you might do something like that." Which doesn't feel like Claire, doesn't seem like these characters. It just feels like a completely contrived way to get round this that maybe makes more sense in the book, but fell completely flat for me. So where does that leave us? Well, I did mention last week that I had been spoiled previously about the Nuclavie, so yeah, I did know that the guy who appeared is meant to be Buck Mackenzie. And that was because, basically, I was looking up episode titles, and it just popped up with the episode 7 summary, which was even weirder because it didn't have an episode 6 summary at the time. But it said that, yeah, Buck Mackenzie was doing something, so I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, I was kind of surprised because obviously it's a different actor. And if I hadn't read that, frankly, I might have been a little bit confused as to who it was meant to be. I mean, I imagine Graham McTavish is probably a bit busy making House of the Dragon to play it this year, so they got in this random dude instead, and he might be fantastic, he might be even better. I'm sure he'll make the role his own. Yeah, I'm not really sure why Buck's here, or what he's got to do adding to the story. I mean, obviously he's the son of GALLIC, and that presumably means he can time travel. But how did he get here, considering last time we saw him he was literally in America and now he's back in Scotland? I mean, sure, maybe he came back to the ancestral lands, but why would he be heading here? Is this a place he knows? Is this a place he'd ever been? Why would he have? Anyway, we'll see what happens, because obviously I'm sure him and Randy Foreman and the time tunnel will all end up factoring into it somehow. So that's it for this week. Until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.